Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 29th meeting of the Cass Clay Food Commission here on March 11th at Fargo City Hall. My name is Mike Thorsted, West Fargo City Commissioner. I'm substituting for Jenny today, who is feeling a little bit under the weather, so we'll limp our way through here and we'll get to the end eventually. So, welcome everybody. Should have a agenda in front of you, commission members. The first order of business is to approve the order and the contents of the overall agenda. Is there any additions, revisions, corrections? If not, I'd entertain a motion on the agenda.
So moved.
Yes, first and second. Okay. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 1B is review and take action on the minutes from the January 8th, 2020 meeting. You should have them in your packet or have received them. So whenever you're ready, I'd be willing to accept a motion on those as well.
Motion to accept the minutes from January 8th.
A motion by Chelsea, is there a second?
Second.
Is a second? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Third item we got here is just to welcome Ken Pollock, and Ken's not here today. Ken's going to be the new representative from the Cass County Commission, and I've known Ken for many years, and I know he'll be a very valuable member of the commission. So welcome, Ken, if you're on TV or wherever. Glad to have you on board. Okay, item number 2 is the commission check-in. I guess we just go down the line here and see if there's any comments or anything anyone would like to bring forward. We'll start at this end.
Nope. Hi, everybody.
I'm good.
I'm good.
Chelsea from Horace. We are putting the bee pollinator habitat in our Horace Happenings this next issue.
Nothing today.
Good morning, I'm John Strand with the Fargo City Commission, and I'll just say this for the sake of saying it. Wednesdays are not my good days, so I apologize as often as I'm unable to attend, but I'm glad I could today.
Well, we're always happy to have you, John, when you can make it. So, all right, we go on to item number 3. I don't know if Mindy is here.
I don't think she is. We just had a certificate for her. Mindy has been on the Food Commission since, I looked it up, July of 2016. She served her 2-year term and then she did a second term. So because of a job change, she's gonna have to come off the commission, but we just wanted to recognize her for her service on the Food Commission. She's a valuable asset to our community with her knowledge in local foods and food systems. So thank you, Mindy.
Yeah, she was a valuable member, as everyone is of the board, and very active as well. So it's too bad she has other commitments, but I think we understand that as well. So yes, thank you, Mindy. Okay, we're going to item number 4. We got appointment of at-large members Beth McConnon and Jeffrey Miller. I believe Jeff wasn't able to attend, but we do have Beth here. And I don't know, Beth, if you want to tell us about yourself or not, it's up to you.
Sure, I can do a little brief introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Beth McConnon. I am an organic farmer. I farm at my family's farm south of Moorhead, Minnesota. We have just under 1,000 acres that have been certified organic since 1997, and we grow wheat, soybeans, and flax. We mill and package our flaxseed, and we distribute it to grocery stores and food co-ops throughout the region. So I'm really interested in the local food movement and organic agriculture as well. I graduated from NDSU with a degree in biological sciences, and I worked as a technician for the potato breeding program when I was in undergrad there. So also interested in new crop varieties for our region, things like that. I live in Fargo with my husband Tony, who's a physical therapist, and I just appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm really passionate about the topics you guys talk about: pollinators, backyard chickens, pesticide use, everything like that. So thank you.
Good, welcome. And I neglected to point out Steve Lindis from the city of Moorhead is here today, filling in for Sarah, who's unable to attend, so welcome, Steve, as well. Board, we do need to take action on the two new appointments of Beth and Jeff. Mindy, as we just talked about, is going to be resigning from the board to take care of other business. So I guess I'd entertain action on the appointment of Beth and Jeff to the board.
We can move to appoint.
Okay.
Move to appoint.
Okay, moved by Steve. Second?
Second.
Second by John. Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Welcome. Okay, we're going to item number 5, and Kim wants to make a announcement or a presentation or note a 5-year anniversary.
Okay. Well, happy anniversary. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kim Lepetsky. I work at Fargo Cass Public Health and am a member of the Cass Clay Food Partners Steering Committee. And since it has been 5 years from our first meeting back in March of 2015, the steering committee thought it'd be a great idea to do kind of a little 5-year anniversary presentation. We've had some of you who have been on the commission since the beginning. We've had commissioners come and go, and then we've got some that are brand new. So we just thought it might be kind of fun to go through a little bit of the history, talk a little bit about what we've done over the last 5 years, and kind of a little discussion on where we're heading the next 5 years. So for the presentation this morning, I'm just going to do a real brief overview of what food systems encompass, the history and timeline of the Cass Clay Food Partners, which is basically the parent group to the Food Commission, and this might be beneficial to those of you who are somewhat new to the group. Then I'm going to focus specifically on the Food Commission, talk a little bit about the history, the purpose, the accomplishments over the last 5 years, and then some opportunities for moving forward. So when we talk about food systems, it's always important to remember that food systems encompass multiple areas. If we look at the graphic on the left, it's a simplified version of a food system, starting at the top of the cycle where you have grow, where we're obviously talking about food production, such as farming, gardening, both residential and community, animal production, urban agriculture, pollinators, and so forth. As we move around the cycle, we have processing, the art of taking that food and turning it into a consumable product as needed, food preservation, value-added measures, and so forth. Then there's distribution, addressing the transportation aspect of the food system, moving food from place to places where consumers can consume it for either direct sales, like places like farmers markets or grocery stores. Then you have get, deals with how consumers access food. Do all residents have easy access to healthy food options? Make, do consumers know how to prepare food? Teaching skills and education on how to cook and how to eat are in this area. And then eat, we all eat, but where do we eat? At home, in restaurants, and in schools, and are there healthy choices at those places? Are hunger and food insecurity an issue? And then at the end of the cycle, you have composting and disposal. Items at the end, composting, where we work to nourish the soil so that we can put it back into the soil and continue the cycle, or disposal, looking at things like preventing food waste and practices such as gleaning and food recovery. So the graphic on the right is a little more complex and kind of illustrates in more detail the multiple factors that can have an impact on a food system. And we consider these factors as well when we're talking about our local food system. So it goes as broad to the broader systems, such as the economic and the political, social, and biological systems that all play a role on the food that we eat. So as you can see at the illustration, some things to consider might be On the production aspect, is it ecologically friendly? What about soil health? Are chemicals being used? Is the system sustainable? Are there enough producers to meet the demand for local foods? Is there infrastructure in place for local producers to bring food directly to consumers? Is that financially feasible? Are there economics involved? Are there grocery stores in rural areas? What about food regulations and fair trade? And do we have a safe food supply? Land use issues come into play. If we want to grow our own food, do we have zoning and ordinance laws that allow it? How will climate change affect production? Do we have enough pollinators to maintain a healthy food supply? Food literacy and education are important, not only in how we eat and how we prepare food, but in all of these other areas as well. And then, of course, you have the social system and the social justice issues. Do all residents have enough money to buy quality, healthful foods, not just processed high-calorie foods? Are the root causes of hunger and food insecurity addressed in our community? Oftentimes, these root causes fall back on things like transportation, fair wages, affordable housing, and that type of thing. And then there's the cultural aspect to consider. Do religious practices impact food choices and the role that food can play in creating a sense of community among many of our cultures here? And we also need to consider the food that we eat and how it impacts our health and obesity rates and chronic diseases in our community. So there's a lot of these factors, and they're all rolled into having an impact on our local food system. And when we address the local food system, we also address many of these multiple areas. They're all intertwined, and when we look at the food system as a whole, we're talking about all of these issues. So as I mentioned earlier, the Cass Clay Food Commission is part of a larger group known as the Food Partners. And the Cass Clay Food Partners is a group that has 3 arms in it, and we'll get to the structure of the partners in just a minute. But the group has been around since about 2010. And it was first known as the Cass Clay Food Systems Initiative. And it formed as kind of a joint effort between public health and extension on both sides of the river in Cass and Clay County in response to a national good food movement that was going on at the time, which encouraged communities to do 2 things: take a look at all healthy food access for all residents, as well as increasing the production and consumption of locally grown food. So in the early years, this group had a planning committee. We held a summit, an engagement summit. We had various task force groups that worked on different things, such as the One Vegetable, One Community effort, the 1 million square foot garden challenge. We did grower buyer networking meetings and had a lot of different activities going. Then in 2013, we began to work with MetroCog to write the area's first ever food systems plan, which kind of provided a framework for moving forward. And one of the first recommendations in that plan was to form some type of food council or food commission. So the Food Commission was formed in 2015 under the name of the Cass Clay Food Systems Advisory Council. Then in 2017, the partners worked with a communications strategist to kind of rename and rebrand the effort to meet the needs of the changing food culture in our community. So the new name became the Cass Clay Food Partners, and the Cass Clay Food Systems Advisory Commission was renamed to the Cass Clay Food Commission, which we are today. Then in response, in 2018, in response to just people and residents in our community saying, how can we become involved in food partner work if we're not on the commission? We formed the Cass Clay Food Action Network, which is also known as First Fridays at B, to kind of help provide that community engagement opportunity. Funding for the work over the years has come from a variety of different sources. If you're familiar with public health, we're always kind of searching and scraping around for different funds, and oftentimes we work with partners that can work on some of this work and have staff time to do that as their job, but we're also searching for more funding to kind of support and enhance our work. So over the years, a large part of the funding has come out of the North Dakota State Health Department, the Chronic Disease Program, as well as funds from the Northwest Regional Sustainable Development Partnership out of Northwest Minnesota and Partnership for Health in Clay County. And on here is the mission of the Food Partners to improve all levels of our community food system to ensure that residents have access to safe, nutritious, affordable, and culturally based food. And then I put our values on there because when we rebranded ourselves, we took a look at what do we stand for as the Food Partners and came up with our values to be inclusive and economically and ecologically resilient, to celebrate cultures, enhance quality of life for all, and foster entrepreneurship and sustainable innovation. So I mentioned earlier that the Cass Clay Food Partners has basically 3 arms to it. We have a 10-member steering committee, which kind of oversees the work of the partners. We also have the Cass Clay Food Commission, which addresses some of the policy issues related to our food system, and that is us here today. And then we also have that community engagement piece, the Food Action Network, which is First Fridays at Bees. And if you've never been to a First Fridays, I'd encourage you to go. They're held the first Friday of every month. That's starting at 7:30 in the morning, and they address a variety of different food topics. They're engaging and fun, and you also get free coffee, so it's definitely worth going. Okay, so now let's take a look more specifically at the Cass Clay Food Commission and kind of how it came to be. As I mentioned earlier, one of the first recommendations of the Food Systems Plan, which was completed back in the fall of 2013, was to form a commission or a council to address food systems issues in our area. So that year there was an opportunity to apply for some funding out of the state of North Dakota to address risk factors associated with chronic disease. So Fargo-Cass Public Health and the Food Partners were able to secure funding to form the Food Commission. And with that funding, we were able to hire a coordinator, and many of you know Megan Meerdahl, who was our coordinator for the first couple of years, who helped form the group. As well as MetroCog to help administer the commission, and that has been Adam for the last 5 years. And then we also had funds to contract with a researcher to develop our blueprints and our issue briefs and snapshots, and that is Whitney Oxendahl. The Food Commission was basically set up as like a food policy council made up of elected officials and food systems experts. And we had a joint powers agreement that was initiated between the 2 entities that oversee public health. On the Cass County side, that is the City of Fargo, and on the Clay County side, it is the Clay County Commission. We then visited the 6 different jurisdictions and presented the Food Systems Plan and asked for a representative to serve on the Food Commission. And our first meeting was March 25th of 2015. And the general purpose of the group was to advise policymakers and elected officials in Cass and Clay County on food systems issues, as well as to work collaboratively with partners to help achieve our mission. And then this slide just shows the broader purpose that the Joint Powers Agreement lays out as far as the 8 different purposes of the Cass Clay Food Commission: to assess, educate, provide language, support community wellness, cultivate partnerships, encourage inquiries from local jurisdictions, provide recommendations, and oversee the implementation of the Metropolitan Food Systems Plan. So these are pictures from our first meeting. As you can see, we have some people here that have been here for all 5 years with us. Jim Asmuth from Dilworth, Jenny Mojo from Clay County, Heidi Duran was our Moorhead representative at the time, Mike Thorstead, who is from West Fargo, Arlen Rasmussen was from Cass County. Our at-large members were Dana Reith, who was with the Lakes Country Service and Partnership for Health at the time. John Everett, who is a retired farmer and who had been with us since the formation of the partners of 2010. Jessica Arneson from the Great Plains Food Bank at the time. Janet Paul Rice from Concordia College Dining Services, and then Andrea Baumgartner, chef and local restaurant owner. And Mike Williams was also on the group, but is not in the picture, and he represented Fargo. And then the smaller picture just has some of our steering committee members mixed in there too. You have Noelle Harden in the back, and then Megan, our coordinator, Deb Haugen, myself, Adam, and Whitney are on there as well. So the commission now looks like this. We now have 7 governmental areas that are represented since we added Horace about a year and a half ago. John Strand represents Fargo. Sarah Watson Curry is out of Moorhead, and then you have Mike and Jim who are here. Ken Pollock is going to be our Cass County rep, Jenny from Clay, and Chelsea from Horace. And our at-large members, Mindy is coming off, so Jeremiah Utek is our local entrepreneur. We have Kayla Pridmore, a local farmer, Janice Tweet from the Great Plains Food Bank, Jeffrey Miller, who is with the Cass County Soil Conservation Group, and then Beth is new today and a local producer. And then we also have ex officio members who join us at the meetings from Fargo Cass Public Health, Clay County, our partner steering committee, and MetroCog. So as we reviewed earlier, the local food systems can encompass multiple areas. So one of the first things we did at the first meeting that we had 5 years ago was to try to decide which area to focus on. So when the commission first started their work, we focused on urban agriculture because several of the jurisdictions in the area were getting questions about, can we have bees, can we have chickens, how do we do that, is there community garden spots and so forth. So the commission picked urban agriculture to look at first. And then a couple of years ago, we moved to looking at food access issues, and currently we're looking at sustainability and environmental issues as they impact food production. So over the years, we've had a number of research documents that have developed to go along, with these topic areas. And these documents are kind of meant to be guides should a jurisdiction decide to address some of these issues in their community. So the blueprints mainly address some of the urban agriculture issues. And in the blueprints, they have the pros and cons of allowing those particular practices to happen in your community. They have stipulations to consider if you're going to write ordinances for those practices. And then there's a lot of sample ordinances that different communities have that allow the practice and how they've written their zoning and ordinance codes. The issue brief and the snapshot focus more on the food access and sustainability areas, and they provide an overview of the issue as well as what is happening here locally with those particular topic areas. So all in all, we have 17 different documents right now. You can see them all listed up here, anything from backyard chicken keeping to cottage food laws to food waste to hunger and food insecurity, currently looking at pesticides on public lands, so a wide variety of different topics. And I do have a notebook if anybody's interested in seeing more about what each of those has. They are also on our website, cassclayfoodpartners.com, on the resource side. So anybody's welcome to use them, and anybody can access them and use them if they're interested in moving issues forward. Over the years, there has also been some work to get food systems issues addressed in different comprehensive and growth plans. Cass County last year, when they did their new transportation and comprehensive plan, added a food systems chapter in there and also addressed some agriculture areas, farmland preservation, pollinators, that type of thing. Horace addresses community gardens and farmers markets, or Dilworth does, and Horace is working on theirs, trying to get food systems language in their plan as well. And Fargo does have a chapter on healthy food and healthy eating. So we've been working to try to get those things incorporated into the long-range plan, so those things are addressed as we move forward in our communities. We've also been able to move forward with a few of these issues locally. In Fargo, we used the backyard chicken keeping blueprint to draft an ordinance allowing chickens in the city of Fargo. We've also used the blueprint for gleaning to develop a gleaning network and system to be used in our community, and are currently working on a healthy corner store initiative in the Jefferson neighborhood. So as you can see, there's a lot of research and education that we've covered over the years. We've had addressed a lot of these. Moving forward, it would be nice to be able to figure out how we can work together and get more of these things move forward in the local jurisdictions. One of the activities that the Food Partners Steering Committee is going to be planning for this spring is to meet with each of the jurisdictions and have a conversation on what food systems issues are you hearing about in your jurisdiction, and what might you like to be interested in addressing or moving forward, and how can we work together to do this. So you will be contacted soon, if you haven't already, to help set up these meetings and get a group of city people as well as commission members to have this conversation. Also, the steering committee would like to hear from you on any thoughts that you have on the future direction of the Food Commission and how we might work together to move some of the research and education we've provided over the years to move that into action in the different jurisdictions. So if anybody has any thoughts or ideas, we'd love to hear them. Be thinking about what you might want to address in your local jurisdictions as well when we come out to meet with you.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Kim. Is there any questions, comments from the board? John?
Kim, I'm just curious, how many food commissions are out there in the world?
There's several. They have lots of different setups. Some of them incorporate governmental entities like we have, along with food systems experts. Some are mainly citizen-driven. I would say, gosh, as far as a number, I don't know, but there are quite a few that are taking a look at this. And I don't know, Deb Hogan, you might know. I know you did a lot of research up front. We took a look at how the different commissions were set up, where they were. The West Coast had quite a few of them. St. Paul has one. Minneapolis had homegrown. Iowa is big. So there's several of them out there that deal with different issues.
Any additional questions, comments? I'll just make a comment since I've been on here since the beginning, and I'm one of the old timers here. So, I remember, I think it was Kim and Adam that came and requested a membership from West Fargo, and quite frankly, the commission didn't, throw out their arms and say, "Where have we been all our life?" It's just one of those comments. Oh, good, another board to serve on. But I think at the time, I'm speaking for myself, I guess, is we didn't really understand what food systems were and all that. I guess you always, in my opinion, you think of Hornbachers or family fare or something. Those are food systems, but that's far from the truth of the matter. And I think it's really created. I especially value the blueprints and the snapshots because it doesn't. It's not only an advocating group of information. It also talks about the cons and it talks about other jurisdictions and what they're doing. And I think it's a very valuable tool for cities to at least refer to and when they're planning and stuff. And I know a lot of the information within those blueprints is very much congruent with our comprehensive plan in West Fargo. We're trying to get away from driving to everywhere, and especially like West Fargo, which started out as just a suburb and still is, but we want the people to get back to neighborhoods, and that includes food systems. And I think one of the things you pointed out in our core values is improving quality of life. And to me, I think a lot of things we talk about are quality of life issues here. It's not just food, which is obviously important. We all need it and use it, but it's things like, local gardening, farmers markets, that all adds to quality of life. And I think that's something that's been very valuable. So you're 5 years into it. I've really enjoyed my time on here. And I've learned a lot, and I think there's been a lot of good information beyond just food systems that's come into play here. We're going to talk about weed control and stuff today, which, it's an offshoot or valuable in the discussion on food, but it's also beyond the scope of what you think of when you just think of food systems. So I appreciate everyone's input over the years and all the people that have been members and commissioners and like I said, I'll just speak for myself. I learned a lot, and I have totally different perspective than what we had when Adam and Kim said, hey, come join this group. So, again, thanks for all your work.
Thank you for being here for 5 years and sharing your insight as well.
Okay, anything else on the subject, folks? All right, I think Whitney just ran out. So she was going to introduce Cass County Weed Control Officer Stan Wolf. Maybe Stan will have to introduce himself.
Well, yes, I'm Stan Wolf, Weed Control Officer for Cass County, and that's noxious weed, not recreational. It's to the point where we have to distinguish this here, because otherwise I may get a few crazy calls. Yes, I'm the Director for the Weed Control Program for Cass County, and I'll give a little synopsis of our program. You have some information in front of you, both from Whitney and from myself. Our main program or responsibilities is to control noxious weeds in the county. And the control means to prevent the spread of weeds, be it weed seeds or weed roots or live weed portions. And so we'll talk about how we control that in a bit. My main responsibility is to control the weeds in the road rights of way. That includes the state, county, and the township roads. That is my main program. And, but yet I also monitor all the lands in the county on both public and private lands. When I monitor, meaning if I see a weed infestation, noxious weeds, I need to contact that landowner and say, hey, you are required to control these noxious weeds. And that's on public and private lands. The public lands, I work with those entities like the water resource districts, the Cass County, the park up at Buer Lake, the flood lots that are of interest here and in other areas. If it's a private owner, I need to contact that landowner. We do not conduct any control measures on private land. We leave that for the private landowner, and they are to do the work necessary to control the weeds there. We encourage those private landowners to control those weeds. We have a program in the county for the non-crop, non-CRP lands where we can reimburse a portion of the herbicide costs to that operator to help encourage them to control the weeds, targeted to people with pastures and such, and also to the small landowners that little ranchettes, that they've got a few acres, they got a horse or two out there, and then they get weeds infesting that pasture area. This is to help encourage the control of the noxious weeds. And our whole program is directed by the noxious weed law, which is in Century Code Chapter 4.1-47. It essentially says that each person shall do all things necessary and proper to control the spread of noxious weeds. In other words, let's be a good neighbor. Weeds do not respect the fence line. They'll slip under the wire and do what they do, which is find an open area and establish and spread their weeds, their seeds. That's a weed. And a noxious weed is one that is designated by the North Dakota Commissioner of Agriculture. It's a designation, and that a noxious weed is one that is invasive, hard to control, and can harm the land, the natural areas, can't think of the word here, and livestock, big game, deer and such, and livestock, and people. If it can harm people and all of that, it's deemed noxious, and then everyone is required to do what they can to prevent the spread, prevent the weed seeds from being spread. If you're out enjoying the natural areas, be it horseback riding or camping or what have you, and you notice noxious weeds there, try not to grab the seeds and take them home with you, especially for the trail riders. There's a few weeds that are out there on the noxious list that are very detrimental to livestock. They're poisonous. And so these are the things that everyone is asked to be involved in doing. So how do we control these crazy noxious weeds? Well, there's cultural control, which is tillage. We can, as simple as mowing them before they go to flower. You can control the seed formation. That is, for a landowner, if I say they've got noxious weeds out there, you need to control them. If they mow it down, they're in compliance with the law, and we're good to go. You can till them, you can pull them by hand. I see some nodding over there from the organic person. Very, very effective there, depending on the size and the scope of the area. We can use biocontrol agents, which are organisms that specifically attack and control seed formation or even outright kill the weed. Leafy spurge flea beetles are a prime example, a classic cultural control program where when they were introduced, say back up leafy spurge, and most of our noxious weeds are not native to the areas. That's one of the issues, the factors for it on the noxious weed listing. And so we've gone back to the native area where it originally came from, found some insects that work on leafy spurge, and they've been deemed to be only effective on leafy spurge. They do not impact any other plants or crops or such. And we've taken infestations that were virtually useless, pastures that were totally infested with leafy spurge, introduced the beetles in there, and in a few years, those ranchers were able to put cattle back in again and utilize that area. So they're very, very effective, and we are putting them out, utilizing them when and where we can. On leafy spurge, we have agents on Canada thistle, and we are working to introduce the agents, stem mining weevil, and even a Canada thistle rust. That's very new, and we're working with the U.S., with North Dakota Department of Ag people, Extension, trying to build up nursery areas that hopefully we can incorporate out into the other areas. So that's another means of control. Then, of course, there's herbicides. And that is our primary means because it is effective and quick and cost effective for us. And the use of them is judicious. We use them where there is a weed infestation. We spot spray, even our road ditches, spot spray those areas that have the weeds there. And before we do any herbicide application, we assess the area, and first we make sure that the weed is there. We ID the weed. Then before we jump in on the equipment and put a product out, we assess what's the temperature going to be for the day, what's the wind speed, what's the wind direction, what are the neighboring non-target susceptible plants that we'd want to not impact. Certainly we don't want to impact any organic operations in the neighborhood there. And so we assess all of that before we even go out and put a product down. Then we determine what is the best product for that particular location, that particular area. So we're very judicious in what we put out because we don't want to impact the neighboring areas. And because of this protocol, which is one is required by the chemical label, and two, this is just good plain management. Because of our protocol and our own applicators and our contract applicators that are doing the road ditches, the past couple of years we've had 0 calls from people who have thought we may have impacted their soybean fields or their production. So we're very cognizant of what we do, where we do it, and how we do it. And so I feel very, very good on that. And the issue of flood lots. The Cass County Commission owns quite a number of flood buyout lots, of which I am overseeing those. I'm looking at them. They're usually residential lots in areas, and take small equipment to go in and take care of them. So I do them. I or my direct employees will monitor these sites and do the appropriate weed control applications in there. They're flood lots. They get flooded very occasionally here the last few years. And that's a prime spot where noxious weeds, primarily Canada thistle, will infest, so I work very hard to keep them under control, to be a good neighbor to the residents in the area. And the county commission has asked me to control not just the noxious weeds, but to control the lawn weeds, the dandelions, and the other obnoxious weeds that one would see in these residential lots. And so I'm out there taking care of them, like I say, to be a good neighbor. And that brings us to probably why we're here, why I'm here, because back in, I believe it was 2017, Food Commission and people were looking at utilizing some of these county-owned flood lots for community gardens. Well, when I heard about that, I says, oh, okay, we better check the records here. Sure enough, I had applied a herbicide down to control the obnoxious weeds, the dandelions and such, but I had used a product that had a long soil residual, meaning the chemical was still active in the soil long after we made the application. It could take several years, actually, for it to dissipate in the soil. When I checked the records, I said, okay, these are not going to be good for community gardens. I replied back to the people and say, yeah, better hold off on this because it's not going to work out well. Tomatoes, cucumbers, and whatnot are not going to grow. And so they reassessed. Since that time, I have changed the product that I've been putting down using the same products that are used by homeowners and lawn care companies on the lawns. It's not quite as effective, but it's still good, and it doesn't have the soil residual issue. So if there are areas that the commission wants to utilize as community gardens, I would assume they would be safe to use. When I say assume, we would to be absolutely sure, we'd have to do a soil assay, take a sample of soil, grow susceptible plants in it in the greenhouse, compare that to another pot of soil from an untreated area, and compare the growth pattern between the two. And I have done that on some fields where product had been put on to see how long it would last. So I'm assuming things would work for the community gardens on those lots right now. And so with that, just to help, I should back up here. I'm very interested in working with people with certain concerns on weed control and herbicide application. We have an organic grower in the county. We give him a buffer. We have a number of people that want to cut hay in the ditches for their horses or their livestock. And even though the products we're using do not impact livestock, they would prefer not to have any herbicide put on. And I say, okay, you tell me where that area is, we'll mark it on our spray maps. Our applicators will not put any product down until after the hay has been cut and the bales removed, and then we spray in the fall for any regrowth of those weeds. That's working very well for those people. They appreciate that. And in fact, it actually makes our job a little bit easier because the grass is not growing as fast as the weeds. We see the weeds easier and we can do a better job of controlling the weeds. And so we're working with those people. And we actually had, there are a number of vineyards in the county, And grapevines are very sensitive to herbicides, to certain classes of herbicides. We know where those locations are. They're on the same map. And our applicators are working, make sure that when they are applying in the area, all the conditions are proper so that nothing is moving toward the grapevines, you know, the wind speed, wind direction and all that. And it's working fine. Haven't had anybody complain that we've dinged or nicked their vineyards. Then we had even a new crop come up that said they don't want any herbicides around. CBD hemp oil production. They want nothing in the area for any pesticide, because if it doesn't impact the plant so much as if it gets into the oil, and it's tested that there is a pesticide residue that renders that oil unsaleable. You have to destroy it. So we gave that guy a 1 mile berth. He took care of the weeds. He mowed the weeds in the ditches, and we worked out. So I'm very willing to work with the different organizations, producers and such. If they have a concern with herbicide application, I'll work with them, as long as we can figure out a means to control the noxious weeds. That's the main thing. If we can keep the noxious weeds from spreading, then mow it, till it, hand pull it, or what have you, we're good to go. I'm good with that, and be very willing to work with the commission or any organization with the community gardens or any events on there, because I want to make sure that our community has a successful and enjoyable experience in the outdoors. And this occurred to me here, one little side note with community gardens, if they want to go organic and bring in animal manure to use as a fertilizer, they need to be careful where they get that manure from, or the compost even, because if the animals were fed ditch hay and the hay was sprayed before it was cut, the chemical, the herbicide, is not broken down until it gets into the soil. So that means it goes right through the animal in its active form and can be in that manure. In the case in point, I had one gal, she had a garden in Fargo. She got horse manure from somebody out in the countryside. The garden did not grow. She called me and says, "What are you guys using?" She found out it was ditch hay fed to the horses. "What are you guys using in spraying the ditches?" And I told her, and I had said, it goes through the animal. Oh, it's going to take her about 3 years for that garden to break down the herbicide in the soil before she could have a good garden again. So that's a caution statement for the commission and other people. You know, if they're going to use natural fertilizers, be careful where of the source of that. So with that, there's more information in the packet of our program, both in mine and Whitney's. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Good. Thank you, Stan. Is there any questions for Stan?
So I'm familiar with a number of entrepreneurs who do things like teas and herbal salves. Would there be any consideration to allow them to pick like dandelions and dandelion flowers in particular to go through and harvest on those open lots before you spray?
If before I spray, no. If you let me know that a certain areas people want to harvest them out of there, I'll flag that and wait until that harvest period is done. And then I can go in and spray them. Like I say, the main thing is we control the noxious weeds. The obnoxious weeds, dandelions and such, even that I'll be very willing to work around. And one thing I did not mention, starting this year, for the flood lots and the residential areas that I'm spraying or will be taken care of, when I will be going out and spraying, I will be putting flags out, much the same as the lawn care companies. Herbicides, pesticides are being applied, and to stay out until the flags have been removed. I will be doing that, and the county has a communication officer that's going to be working press releases and such. I'll be working with him to get the word out via social media and such. So that'll be a new part of the program here coming this year. So we'll be working with the community to inform them as best we can that activities are going to be planned. I can't give a specific day and time because it's all weather dependent.
Right.
And but be willing to work with the community on that.
So I appreciate the social media aspect and stuff. Do you have plans to actually have like the spray maps you talked about? That sounds to me like a ripe thing. You could have a GIS map that someone could actually go online and look at and see what has been sprayed historically. So, you know, there are people out there that do gather, but they don't always know where they're going to be gathering. And so if they had an idea of where things have been sprayed.
Okay.
And what has been sprayed, actually?
I could, yeah, that's something we could work on. Like I say, I work with the various hay producers and such in the vineyards. That map is in-house. I have not put it up on the web or available, you know, electronically. If people want, they can certainly come in and I can give them a map. You know, that's public info. That's something to be, you know, we'll work something out. How to do that, and, you know, for harvesting and such, you know, we probably have to put in, just off the top of my head, if it can be harvested by a certain date, fine, then we'll work on that. That's something, it's going to take a few heads to come together and develop something. So yeah, I'd be very willing to work on something, to put something together for the benefit of the community.
Any additional questions? All right, well, very good. Thank you for your presentation, Stan.
Thank you.
Okay, item 7 is Clay County Soil and Water Conservation District Representative Gabriel Foltz and Emma Nauterman will introduce Gabe.
Good morning. To round out the topic here, we'll jump to the other side of the river and have Gabe from Clay County Soil and Water Conservation District let us know what's going on in Clay County.
All right, as Emma said, I'm Gabe Foltz. I work with the Clay Soil and Water Conservation District, and I'm the County Ag Inspector for Clay County. So I'm just going to kind of talk about Minnesota noxious weed law, kind of what the responsibilities are of landowners pertaining to that noxious weed law, and then about our spraying practices and what we do to control the weeds on county property. So first off, noxious weeds, according to the Minnesota noxious weed law, it describes noxious weeds as plants that are a threat to public health, the environment, public roads, crops, livestock, and other property. And what the law says is that a person owning land, a person occupying land, or a person responsible for the maintenance of public land shall control or eradicate all noxious weeds on their land. And there's certain, I believe there's 48 listed weeds on the Minnesota noxious weed list this year. And the MDA puts out a new weed list every year and occasionally add weeds as they're noticed or as they become more of an issue. And there's different categories of weeds on these lists too. So some of the weeds just need to be controlled. Some of them have specific, like they can't be sold in the state. There's other weeds that have to be eradicated if they're found throughout the state. So here's just a few examples of some of the noxious weeds. So common tansy and leafy spurge, those are both control lists. So they need to be controlled by either spraying or mowing. And with leafy spurge, there's a biocontrol program, kind of as Stan mentioned, using leafy spurge flea beetles to control them. And poison hemlock is an eradicate list species that we actually just found last year in the county. And that's the infestation right there, the picture of it. So it wasn't a very big infestation, but so we're working on trying to eradicate that from the county right now. And that's extremely poisonous to both humans and livestock. So as far as our spraying practices go, timing of our spraying, we usually meet every spring with our county highway department engineer and then our spraying contractor, and plan roads to be sprayed throughout the spring and summer. Most of our spraying happens right away in the spring, as soon as the weeds start greening up and we start to notice them out there. And then we spray until all the planned roads are completed. So typically we spray 140 to 150 road miles of weeds every year, and that's so we do spot spraying, so it's not just a consecutive 150 miles of spraying, it's spot spraying, covering 150 miles of spot spraying. And then throughout the summer and into the fall, we monitor and then add roads to the spraying list as needed, and then as long as funding is still available. The time of day is not really specific. It's more dependent on the weather, and wind speeds and directions are important. And our spray contractor is pretty, he likes to be extremely cautious along like organic farming, and you know, if it's along sensitive crops such as soybeans or sugar beets, that the chemicals that he's using will also kill the sugar beets or the soybeans. So he's pretty safe around those fields that are bordering those road ditches that he's spraying. And then we do plan some roads and wait for fall spraying, and a lot of that is with thistles, especially if they have been mowed a couple times throughout the summer. The fall is a good time to get good control on thistles. As far as the locations go, so probably 99% of what we spray is on county right-of-ways. And we kind of focus on a lot of the roads in the eastern part of the county. And that's just because a lot of the newer noxious weeds are moving in from the east. So we try to get a hold of those before they get too out of control. So there's kind of satellite locations of those weeds, and one of those is wild parsnip there. And we're trying to get a hold on that before it kind of spreads west and spreads to more of the county. So we tend to focus a lot on the eastern part of the county for the time being. And then another reason for that is many farmers that are in the valley, they mow their road ditches, and that's a good way to control. There's a lot of thistles and stuff right in the valley and along the county roads here. So mowing them is a pretty effective way to control them. So, and then like I said, we do spot spraying, so it's just where the noxious weeds are present. And then we do a little bit of flood buyout property, and that's just as needed, and it's more of on a complaint basis. So we'll get calls from neighboring landowners saying that there's a weed issue on this particular flood buyout property, and then we'll have our spray contractor go out and spray that area. So typically it's been on a complaint basis, but we're trying to get more proactive with monitoring those before we get the complaints. And then I guess just one interesting thing that we started doing last year, we worked with Clay County and then Pheasants Forever, and I don't know if you're familiar with the Crestwood buyout properties south of Moorhead. We worked to convert those, I think it was about 8 acres of that buyout property into pollinator habitat. So that involved spraying and killing the grass and the weeds and stuff that were out there currently, tilling it up and then planting the pollinator habitat. So over the next couple years, we'll be mowing that and keeping the weeds under control, and then hopefully within 2 to 3 years, we hope that will look pretty good out there. And I think the plan is our hope is to do more of that in the future with some of these buyout properties. If that was a pretty good location for it, and it was a nice open area, and it worked out well. So if we can find other buyout properties like that, we would like to do that in the future too, so. And then township roads are the responsibility of the township, and then private and public lands are the responsibility of the landowners and or the public entity that owns that land. As far as notifications to the public, we do send out a general notice for landowners to control noxious weeds every spring, and that typically goes out in mid-May. So what it says is just basically that there's a Minnesota noxious weed law, and we kind of explain what it says and what the responsibilities of the landowners are. Currently, we don't have a specific notification for when we start our spraying, and that's just because the time varies from year to year based on the weather. Sometimes if we have an early spring, we'll start earlier. If we have a late spring, it'll start later. And then as I kind of mentioned, we add roads to that list as the summer goes on. So we'll just notify our contractor and say, hey, this road had some thistle issues. Can you get to it as soon as you can? And he typically goes out within the next couple days. So it'd be a little bit difficult to try to notify the public in cases like that. And then, so from Minnesota statute, or what Minnesota laws say, so as far as spraying, there's a pesticide licensing program that's run by the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. So what that says is that all spray applicators that are going to be spraying restricted use pesticides, they have to test to become a certified applicator and be licensed to use that pesticide. And we actually administer that testing in our office. And then to keep those licenses up to date, they can either retest or they attend workshops to keep their license renewed every year. So many of the pesticides that are restricted use and can only be used by these certified applicators. So our contractor is a certified applicator and uses these restricted use pesticides. There are general use pesticides too that don't require licensed applicator, but on all of our county road ditches we use the restricted use. So our contractor is certified for that. And then the Minnesota pesticide control law also says that all pesticide labels are required to be followed. So every pesticide label or herbicide label has a recommended rate for certain weeds and kind of what to be careful of or cautious of, and so under the law, all labels are required to be followed according to that. And then briefly, I'm just going to cover the Minnesota buffer law. This doesn't directly relate to kind of our spraying practices, but we do work with the buffer law in the Soil and Water Conservation District. So what the buffer law is it requires landowners to put a 50-foot buffer of perennial vegetation along all public waters. So those are DNR designated streams, rivers, and wetlands. And then 16.5 feet of perennial vegetation along public drainage ditches. And those are county and judicial ditches, basically just all the numbered ditches throughout the county. The purpose of the law is it's a water quality law, and the purpose is to trap and filter sediment runoff, and then provide setbacks for tillage and fertilizer application and pesticide application. It doesn't directly relate to our road ditch spraying because it's more focused on setbacks from the agricultural land and the water courses. And then it's the landowner's responsibility to plant and maintain the buffers and do weed control. So currently most of the landowners, the type of weed control that they're doing is just mowing. They're planting it and then mowing it a couple times a year to control the weeds until the buffers get well established. So, and I guess that's all I have. I don't know if there's any questions on anything specific, but.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Gabe? Okay, go ahead.
Hey Gabe, same question that I asked Stan. Do you have the ability to, have a map, spray map, same idea that would be available to the public? and especially if it's available online.
Yep. So actually our contractor, when he sprays, he has GPS points and marks all the locations where he's sprayed. And then at the end of the year, he'll send that information to us. And that's on ArcMap. And we haven't, in the past, we haven't posted it on our website, but that is something that we can do. But that would be after the fact, I guess.
Still useful if you're happen
Right.
to be a resident or even a visitor that has kids, animals, or other things, and you're running
Yep.
through public lands.
Right.
It's nice to know what you might be running through, even after the fact.
Yep. Yeah, and it's been pretty helpful for him to have those GPS points, and we know exactly where he's been and what he's covered, so that's definitely something we can do. So.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item number 8, which is pesticide use and public land issue brief and snapshot. Whitney and assistance.
Hello, Commission. We have the document we presented at the last commission. Hopefully some of you guys were here for that. It just goes over what each jurisdiction is doing for pesticide use. A big thank you to Stan and Gabe. They were a huge resource for me. They were so willing to work with me and tell me everything they knew. I mean, I got like 5%. They know so much. So the things that were updated and added were Horace. We have some of Horace's information on page 4 or 5. I'm still waiting for Horace Parks District to get back to me, so that will be updated at a later time. And then Jenny asked that I include what residents could do if they found noxious weeds in the townships. So that is in the Appendix B. So those were the two main ones besides updating Fargo's contact to Ben Dow. Does anyone have any questions about those 3 updates or any questions about the document?
Any questions?
Whitney, I'm just curious, and I know I didn't catch your presentation before, but your reference to Roundup and glyphosate. When I go home to my home area and fall harvest is going on, more recently, in more recent years, I remember one time asking, "What's that smell?" And everybody said, "Well, it's Roundup." When the harvest is going, it's not just the application of the Roundup and the glyphosate. It's when they go into the straight combining and they spray massive fields, miles and miles of fields, and then they go in and they straight combine and harvest. We're all breathing it every day, all the time.
There is a drift factor.
And it's not just drift. I'm talking about when they harvest it and then the dust goes into the air. And it's immense, and we don't talk enough about that in our community and the impact of Roundup and how much we're all exposed, especially when the harvest is going full bore. It's just a note. I grew up on a farm and I see this when I go home, and I've asked about it, and I don't remember that when I was young. Of course, Roundup didn't exist then.
Yeah, there is more awareness about some of the low-level exposures to pesticides, and there's more research being done on the potential toxicity of different types of pesticides, herbicides. Yeah.
So I hope we start looking at the air quality aspects during the harvest and the implications to that as well.
Yes, that we'll be talking a little bit more about, especially the impact on that children can receive. The next one we'll be looking at is pesticides on school grounds. And so there are concerns, especially from parents, about some of the low-level toxicity. How do we just minimize exposure? And that's one reason why we're bringing this here, is just to educate. And how do you minimize exposure, like through notification systems and flagging the area, and just so people know what's happening there, so they can avoid or reduce their risk.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Well, very good. I think they're looking for action on this item, so if the board would so choose to take action on it, I'd look for a motion to approve this presentation or deny it, I guess.
I'll make a motion to approve the snapshot. Is that what we're,
Yep. Thank you, Chelsea.
snapshot for pesticide?
Second by Steve over here, and I guess all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you for your work on that, and as John said, there's apparently follow-up work to do as well on things related to this as well, so thank you very much, Whitney.
Okay, and let me know if you have any input into the one I'm working on in schools. I'm almost done with it, but if you have anything, please notify me or Kim, and she'll reach out to me. So you'll see that at the May meeting.
Thank you, kids, for being patient, too. Had to wait a
We
long
made it.
time.
We did it, you guys.
All right, we're on to item number 9, which is the public comment opportunity. Is there anyone from the public that would like to make a short presentation or what? We do have one. All right. Please state your name and any organization you may happen to represent if you do.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Jen Walla. Thank you all for being here, and thank you very much for the presentations of information and for the ways that you're partnering with the public and various organizations as well. I really appreciated hearing about that. And thank you to Whitney for writing up all of the information that she's pulled together. I'm very glad to have that. I work as a childcare provider in Moorhead and have been involved with local food systems in various ways for a long time. I'm also a community garden organizer and participant. And I guess I had a few comments that I wanted to make about the chemical use on public lands. One thing that I've noted bringing my child to parks, a lot of times the signage has been very small and hard to notice. A group of us have played for a long time, and then as we've come out, we've seen a sign in a different part of the park that we hadn't been in initially, and the kids have been on the ground rolling around in the grass or in the trees, and we've all said, oh yikes, we're gonna go home and give them baths. And so I'm not sure if there's a better way for the signage, but we would really, I've talked about this with a number of parents, we would really appreciate more visible signage. I also know a number of people, and I'm one of them, who work with wild foods, foraging, mushrooms, medicinal plants. I know that you mentioned that, Jeremiah. And really having safety and accessibility, even public education about what plants are good and safe and useful for a lot of those things. A lot of them also can help to pull residues out of the soil and clean up the soil after a lot of the flooding that we have along the Red River. And so I would really like to work with, or for there to be work with, and I would be happy to participate in that, talking about ways to even minimize some of the spraying more for those things. And I definitely will be contacting about some of the areas and times for spraying. I really appreciate your questions, Steve, about getting the info out about when spraying happens. I know Moorhead and Fargo have been really great about like when mosquitoes are being sprayed. And so to have public notice about when some of the spraying is happening, particularly in towns, would be really helpful. As far as, and you addressed the community garden concerns that I had been wondering about, so that's already addressed. I know that there are a number of towns that have made some limitations about spraying in small areas. As Whitney noted in her notes, Stillwater and Shorewood have some areas that are completely have strong limits on spraying. Rochester has made a few parks and public lands that have no spray, and then have an option for public requests for other lands that might be no spray. And that might be a really nice way for cities to work into testing that out and seeing how it works as far as plants having not having plants take over that are problem plants, and seeing how no spray controlling might work, and also working with the public so that if there are people that really want the land to be sprayed, some parks could be spray-free for those like me who would really like there to be no spray, and some could continue to be the areas that are weed-free for those who feel that that is their aesthetic preference. But I would really appreciate that being an option to work with, and I would be glad to help with research and working on finding ways to develop projects like that. And my information is on the sheet back there if anyone would like to contact me about taking me up on that. So thank you all for your attention to these issues.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. Are there any questions before you run? John?
How are you rebounding from your bicycle accident years ago? I'm glad to see you out and about.
Thank you very much, John. That was actually 10 years ago this last fall. Yes, and I am much better. Concentration is still something, it's harder for me to multitask ever since then. Most other things are largely back to normal.
Well, I'm glad you're still in the saddle.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you all.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your suggestions. Those are very good suggestions to contemplate, so. Any other public comment? Yes, sir.
Hello, how are you guys doing today? My name is Sam Wagner, and I'm the Ag and Food Field Organizer for the Dakota Resource Council. I just wanted to step up and talk a little bit, just letting people know that the Dakota Resource Council is a membership-driven organization of about 350 members in North Dakota. About 40 of them live here in the Fargo-Moorhead area, and I just wanted to extend a hand to our organization's hand to your council. We promote local control, sustainable agricultural practices, healthy soil initiatives, and I am just leaving my contact information for you if you are trying to work on any sustainable food issues or anything locally in the city of Fargo that deals with agriculture. I am extending a hand of friendship to, try and work with you guys and provide any technical expertise or any resources that we or our members might have. Just to give you a little bit of ideas of what we've been working on so far, we've been working with trying to set up meetings with Senator Hoeven, Kramer, and Armstrong to promote country of origin labeling and reinstate mandatory, we call it COOL, for livestock and pork, because ever since 2015, the ruling has been that it is no longer required when you buy a steak or a pork chop or any piece of beef or pork that the companies are required to label where that came from. And one of the initiatives that we could possibly work on here in the city of Fargo is mandating that grocery stores could label where their country of origin is for this, because we do have that data available. We just don't have to mandate doing this, and to do that, that would help out our ranchers in North Dakota, because the idea is that if we provide country of origin labeling, the consumer will have a choice, and if they know that they are buying American beef, they will preferentially buy it, and if we organize around that, that uptick in buying American beef can drive the price of cattle up. So it's an idea to bring to the council, but we are open to also working with you on any other agricultural ideas. I left my name and contact information on the sign-in sheet, and if you have any proposals, I would be happy to hear hear it and try to help in any way that we can as an organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any questions, comments? Nope. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any additional public comment?
Hi, my name is Julie Brummond, and I'm a resident of Fargo. And my concerns are just pretty general. Chemical use, of course. A lot of the chemicals, once they get into our environment, they're there. And some of them break down slowly, some of them never go away. So I would, my concern is keeping the chemical uses to the absolute minimum that we possibly can. And, there's times too when I go riding through the park, I'm on the bike, and I wind up going through a cloud of chemicals because they're spraying somewhere. And there's nothing at either end of the park or the trail or anything to let you know that you're about to get into that situation. And it doesn't seem like breathing those chemicals in can possibly be good for our health. And so, on a nice sunny afternoon, you're out riding in the park or walking or out there with your kids, and then all of a sudden you're accosted by a cloud of chemicals. And who knows what they are, because you don't know, because they're too far away for you to see or ask the people, but you're definitely breathing them in. And so that seems like a serious health issue to me, not knowing what they are. I'd also, and I've seen it on the Moorhead side, on the Minnesota side, the encouragement of more pollinator-type lawns, things that are using fewer chemicals from our citizens. And I would love to see more of that here as well, just to not be using all the chemicals. I mean, a dandelion's not nearly as dangerous to me as the chemicals that we're putting out to kill them. So go dandelion. I can eat a dandelion, I can't eat the chemicals. I'm not gonna sprinkle those chemicals on my salad, so I'm not so sure I should be sprinkling them on my yard. So if we can kind of consider some of those sorts of things, it would make my life much better, and I think the lives of the people in our communities much better. I mean, we look at the rates of cancer that we have going through on and all the other health issues, asthma, things like that people are dealing with. So a lot of these chemicals are a serious threat to us and our well-being. And maybe in the short run, it's cheaper to use the chemicals to take care of these things, but in the long run, when we look at the effects on our health, I think it's going to be a lot more expensive. So fewer chemicals, ideally no chemicals, but I mean, we also have things that we have to fight against, like mosquitoes. But if we could find better ways of dealing with them, more research, more looking into it, that would make me so happy. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, quick? Nope. Thank you very much. We have just a few minutes left here, so if there's no additional public comments, it looks like we covered most of the public out there. Is there any comments from the commission and our steering committee? Anybody have anything to add to the meeting today?
I just wanted to point one thing out. You all saw this last week in the paper on the front page was Whitney with her discussion on the what we're talking about today. So I thought that was really nice that we got some color. She mentions the resources where people can go and who to call should they have questions. So just wanted to point that out.
Good. Great. Any other comments? Okay, before we move on or move out, couple notes here. The next First Fridays at Theater B is on April 3rd. And the next meeting of this commission will be on May 13th. So, hearing no other action items, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion out there. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yep.
Those opposed may stay here. The rest of us are leaving.